Okay, so the first thing is I know the group is a combination of different people. Some have taken the SAT before, some haven't, some are just starting out, different things like that. So I'm wondering, like for you, where are you at? Like, have you already gone through the syllabus or are you just starting? Have you taken it before?
Okay, I took the paper and pen test last year,
Mm-hmm.
and I intend taking the digital test for the first time next month. That's August.
Okay, I see. So you've already gone through the content before?
Yes, I've been studying with Khan Academy for a while
Okay,
now.
great. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess we'll treat this as a restart of everything. And the biggest thing is that there've been a lot of changes, especially to the reading and writing sections of the SAT. I think math is almost the same. So
Yes, it
that's the
is.
first thing. You need to be aware of like the different changes that have been made. So first I'm going to share an actual paper. And yes. Okay, so I'm going to break it down again because I'm not sure. I know people are watching this video as well. So I'm not sure where you are, if you've gone through the content already, if this is when you're starting out, if you're taking it for the first time, or if not. So if you already know this stuff, this is going to be a refresher. If you are not really familiar with the new format, then this is something that you need to get familiar with. So there are new SAT practice tests, and my advice is stick to these new ones because they haven't really released like a statement saying what's still in the SAT, what's not. So your best bet is to use this as as a guide in terms of what you should study and what you should focus on, because this is like the model that's there. I think there's about 4 or 5 new practice tests. And if you're not sure where those are, if you're in the WhatsApp group, they are in the link. Um, and there's a Google Drive folder that has everything that you need. So just try as much as possible to keep what you're studying relevant because there are definitely some things that are not tested anymore. So if you look at this, the main difference for the reading section is that the passages are very, very short. And that's the same for writing as well. So the reading and the writing sections are combined, as you can see. You have both reading, excuse me, you have both reading and writing, but the format, like when you look at the questions, they look almost the same. You can see there's like a short paragraph and then a question, multiple choice. And it's the same as you go through the reading and the writing section. So you won't really know. Like they're not going to tell you number one is a writing question and then ask you the question. Or number two is a reading question and ask you the question. The thing about it is that's the first thing you need to do. Like when you reach a question, you need to know whether it's reading or writing that's being tested. So that's step one. So first of all, you know that they all practically look the same. You have a short paragraph and the question that follows. So the difference between reading and writing, I'll just go through it really quickly, is that for reading, they're testing your understanding of what you're reading. So they're testing whether you are able to like comprehend the passage and answer a question about the passage. For writing, you're focusing on vocabulary. So things to do with punctuation or words, things like that are definitely writing questions. So if you look at question one, it asks you, former astronaut says, although she doesn't have a definite idea, okay. When you look at the question itself, it says, which choice completes the text with the most logical or precise word or phrase? So the fact that they're asking you which word is the most logical, this is a writing question because they're not focusing on, oh, so in the passage, what did this person say? Or, they're asking you about logically completing the passage. So this is definitely a writing question. And if you scroll let's see. Let's find a reading question. Okay, you see the most logical and precise word choice. Okay, this question asks you what choice best states the main purpose? So they're asking you after reading the passage, are you able to see like why did this person write the passage or what's the most interesting thing that's in this passage, right? So it's very important that you figure out if it's a reading or a writing question. And like we've done just now, the best way to do that is not to read the passage, but to read the question. And it's good that they've separated them like this because, you don't have to read everything and then figure out whether it's reading or writing. You can just like read the actual question. So my advice is that should be the first thing that you do. That just puts you in the right mindset, especially because for reading, you have different approaches for different kinds of questions. And that's the second thing. So first of all, you have to know, is it a reading or a writing question? Once you figured that out, if you know this is only focusing on like the word choice, and you've read a writing textbook that has told you what to look for, then you know what to focus on. So that puts you in the right mindset. And then if you reach a question and you can tell that, okay, this is a reading, for example, this is a reading question. The next thing is to figure out what kind of reading question is this. And it's not like it would take you like a minute, or it would take you seconds to figure out what kind of question it is, just because of the way the questions are phrased. Like this one asks you what is the main purpose. This one asks you what is the function. You already know it's a function question. Skip ahead, function. So it's going to tell you what kind of question it is. And by you knowing that, that should really help you when you're actually looking at the questions. This one asks you, according to the text, what is true? So this is literal comprehension. Like, okay, you've read the passage, what has happened in the passage? So first thing is it a reading or a writing question? Second thing is, what kind of question is it? And then once you figure that out, you already know the approach. And the more that you practice, the easier that will come to you. Like if you know it's a main idea question, then the first thing that should come to mind is, okay, how do I handle this question? And that should help you. And also, if you know what kind of question it is, you already know what to focus on before you actually read this short passage. So don't read it and then read the question and then come back and read it again. That would be a waste of your time. So that's the first thing you should do. Go to the question, figure out what it is. And yeah, that should help you to get through the section. There's 2 sections like this that look exactly the same. And you have like a difference in the questions. I would say one thing I've noticed is that the questions are being like lumped together. Like we saw the first 4 questions, even in this one, this is also reading and writing. The first 4 questions are writing questions, or the first 6 in this case. And then when you skip ahead, you reach a reading question. Here we go, main purpose. So they're kind of like lumping them together, which is good because you're kind of in the same mindset for the different kinds of questions. But also keep in mind that not 33 questions. I was going to say the duration of this module is not like abundant to a point where you can like take your time and like, like read through a question, read through it again, take some minutes to try and break it down and whatnot. The point is you don't have like time to play with. So just make sure as you go through, you're not wasting time, which is why reading the question first will be very helpful for you as you go through. So this is the new format of the questions. And as I already said before, it's very important that you have like a specific approach for each question. And each person has a different approach, different things work, which is why practice is very important, because you're not going to figure out what works for you if you haven't tried it and seen that, okay, this works or this doesn't work. So just be open, I used to watch a lot of YouTube videos when I was studying for the SAT, because each person has a different approach. Maybe it even works better for you than what you were using before. So just be open to learning and like try to see different approaches that could possibly work, because that will really help you as you take the SAT. And the other thing that I want you guys to know is your mindset is very important. Keep in mind that the SAT is not testing how much you know. It's not testing that. And if you enter the SAT with that approach where you're trying to like use your outside knowledge for, especially in the reading section specifically, if that's your mindset, like, oh my goodness, I need to know all this stuff, then you probably will get a lot of questions wrong. I'm saying that because the SAT is a standardized test. I say this a lot. This is probably my song because I say it almost every week. But it's important to know that this is a standardized test. So it's not supposed to favor anyone in any way, especially for the reading section. So it's not like, oh, I've read a passage about volcanoes and I've studied volcanoes my whole life, so I'm going to do good. No, there's nothing like that. Everything that you know is in the paper. So even as you approach the questions, you have to approach them with that mindset, like, okay, everything that I need is right before my eyes. And at no point will you ever need to apply outside information. So for those who've just joined us, we're kind of starting afresh with the reading section because we have a mixture of, I know most people have already taken the SAT, those who started the reading syllabus. So this is kind of like a refresher, but also we'll be adding more information. So this is just meant to guide you through. And first of all, we looked at the new format. If you're not familiar with that, please make time to at least practice using one of the new SAT papers, because there's about 4 or 5 that have been released. If you need access to those, we have a Google Drive folder in the WhatsApp group. Okay, so for the reading section, you need, as I said, a different approach for each question. And it's not like they'll tell you, okay, step 1, read the question. Step 2, like, no, it's not anything like that. It's just that you need to understand what the question is asking you for. And again, this approach will help you not only in the reading section, because the College Board is very specific. Like when they ask you about vocabulary, they know what they're talking about. It's like very specific to the SAT. When they ask you about the big idea, it's specific to the SAT, right? So you're trying to understand it from their point of view, right? If they ask you for the main idea, you have to understand what they mean by the main idea from their point of view. And once you get that in mind, once you really understand like what they want from you, it becomes very easy, especially because you guys don't have a long passage, right? When I read the SAT, we had like, each passage had like 90 lines of different information, and you had to filter it out and then get to the answer. So you don't have to deal with that. You have a very short passage, and most likely like everything in there will be useful to you. Like you don't have to start like going through and like finding where the point is. It's so short that that won't even be a problem. So what your main focus should be is understand it from their point of view. What do they mean when they ask you for anything? And that's the importance of you studying each kind of question, because if you don't understand what they're asking you for, then yeah, it's useless, you know. You can know what the word function means, but if you don't understand function in the way that they mean it, you get the question wrong. And that's the first thing. Before you even look at the passage, read the question and put yourself in the mindset of, okay, so what am I looking for? Even as you go and read through the passage. Otherwise, I know the reading section, like, I think it's most people's least favorite sections, because we make it hard for ourselves because we try to approach it from what we know and from what we're used to. The SAT is a very unique exam. So the more that you try to adjust your understanding based on the College Board, the better you're going to be at answering questions on the SAT. Otherwise, it's very, very easy. Like I remember the first 2 times I took the SAT, I did well in math because I love math. And yeah, but the reading section wasn't so good. So after I took the SAT twice, I started teaching the SAT under a certain institution in Zambia. And as I was explaining to people each, like the reading section, because that's what I was in charge of, as I was explaining to people, I was like, oh my goodness, this is what they want. Like, you know, explaining to people made me see like, oh, wow, this is like, I wasn't understanding it from their point of view. And after I did that, I had the opportunity to take it again, and reading was my highest section. So the point is that you really need the mindset of, okay, what do they mean when they ask me for this? You know, instead of just like reading the question and then, you know, going to the passage and like, yeah, it's very easy to not understand what they're talking about. So I'll let you guys guide guide like what we do today. But the first thing is I just want to like overall go through the kinds of questions that are there, and then like state how to know that that's the question that they're asking you for. And then you guys will decide if you want us to go through a certain kind of question, like theory, go through the question, or just like go through a practice paper and like tackle the questions like that, so that it's like a practice session. Okay, so the first kind of question is vocabulary in context. And in vocabulary in context, they underline a word in the passage and then ask you to pick from the options which word is most similar in meaning to that question. And the trick is that it's in context. So they're not asking you like, what does the word, what word can I use? What does the word table mean? What they mean is, what did the author want the word table to mean? So that's why these kinds of questions can be on the reading and not on the writing section, because they're testing, okay, if you understand this passage, are you able to really like decipher what the author is trying to say? So that's vocabulary in context. It doesn't test the meaning of words. It tests whether you're able to like get a full comprehension of the passage from the author's point of view. Then we have big idea questions. If you were here when we were like scrolling through the practice test, I think these are the most prevalent questions on the reading section. They ask you about the big idea. And I think they do that on purpose because most people don't really understand what the big idea is. But the big idea is kind of like, it's asking you, if you were to summarize this passage in one sentence, what would you say? And it's very easy. The main fall of people is that you try to get a small part of the passage that's not really encompassing everything. and then you end up getting something that's not actually the big idea, right? But the main purpose is, if you were to summarize this passage, what would you say? Like, what is the author trying to say? If you're part of a debate, like, what's the motion? You know, when you summarize everything into one thing, what's the main point that the author is trying to bring out? So that's the big idea. Then we have, I'll skip analogy questions just because I'll delete it even. Just because I've never seen them on the new SAT. I don't think that they're tested anymore. Inference questions are also kind of prevalent, where they ask you, what is the author trying to imply? Or, you know, what can you infer from what the author is saying? So the trick with these questions is they make it sound like they want you to like decipher, like, you know, dig deep into the psychology of what the person is trying to say. But keep in mind that this is supposed to be a fair exam. Everything that you need is there, like in the paper. And so when they ask you about inference, they are just asking you to rephrase the question. So they'll ask you what can be implied. Sometimes you just need to get something that the author has said and say it from like a bigger point of view, like maybe generalize it or something like that. So those are inference questions. They'll ask you what is implied. And then you have function questions. We also saw a bunch of function questions on the new SAT practice exam. But these ask you, of course, what is the function of this part of the passage? The downfall of these questions is people don't really understand what the College Board means by function. So I like to think of every passage as a debate. So if you think of function, it's kind of saying, okay, if I brought out my first point of view, like what role does it play in the main motion of the debate? So I'm not just asking you what is the function of what I said. I'm asking you like, what is the function in the context of everything else in the passage? So that's the major thing that you need to know about function questions. Then you have tone and attitude. I also haven't seen these on the new SAT, so I'll go ahead and delete them from here. Command of evidence questions will ask you like which claim would like support something that has been said in the passage. So the old SAT asked these in a whole different way, because they would ask you like which lines support this or which lines do not support this. But because the passage is so short, that would be too easy, right? So they'll ask you like what claim would make the author's statement more true or something like that. So the major thing is you're trying to see what would support or what wouldn't support a claim that has been made in the passage. Infographics are very easy. You have a graph, and sometimes the graph will always be connected to the passage, but sometimes the question that they ask you will be solely based on the graph. Sometimes it will need you to combine both the graph and the passage, but overall you have a graph, you have a passage. Then you're supposed to figure out what connection is there or like a specific detail that's been given to you. Okay, so we have how many kinds of questions? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kinds of questions, which is a little. It's very little. And like I said, the major thing is you need to understand what the College Board means by the phrases that they use in their questions. So we have these kinds of questions over here. Like I said, I'll leave it open to you guys. If you want us to focus on one specific kind of question, we can do that. And then after that, go through like specific. So if you pick like big idea, we can study the big idea and like break it down. And then we can go to a paper and answer some big idea questions and see how well we do, like, you know, practical stuff. Or we can just like go to a paper and then we can focus on like identifying the kinds of questions and like just talk about the approaches that you can use, or like, I guess, tips on how to solve the questions. So what do you guys say? Do you want us to go through the questions, like go through a topic and then questions on that topic, or just like go through questions? Anyone? You can type in the chat if you don't want to speak out. No one has any preference? The other reason I'm asking is I don't want to like repeat what maybe all of you have heard before, because maybe all of you were there when we looked at a specific topic. So do you want us to go through a topic or just go through questions? Go through questions. Okay. So stop sharing my screen. So I know we've gone through the first practice test a lot of times. We went through the first section specifically last time. I don't want to like finish you guys' practice materials. That's one of the reasons I'm sticking to one. I don't want to like go through all of them and then you don't have any real practice. So we're going to skip to the second section because I think we've tackled almost all the questions in the first. Okay. So I love it when you guys take part because then we can break down like your thought process behind it and actually learn something, you know, instead of just like skipping through and it not making sense and you making mistakes and whatnot. So the thing about practice is it's good to practice, but if you don't really break down like each paper after you practice, it won't make a difference. So the approach you should use when you're going through practice questions is if you get a question wrong, you have to break down like, why did I get it wrong? Did I look at the wrong part of the passage? Did I not understand? Because in that way, you're actually going to improve the next time you go through such a question. Because what's the difference? If I get it wrong today, I'm going to get it wrong again tomorrow because I haven't really solved why I got it wrong. So make sure you ask yourself why. Even if maybe you got a question right because you guessed. Like what I used to do was I would put a star against all the questions that I guessed on because either way, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, you know, if I got it right accidentally, I would end up passing it and then maybe getting it wrong the next time. So just always break down because the paper that you're going to write on your actual day of taking the SAT, you will never see, like it's going to be something you've never seen before. So the best thing that you can do is work on like your thought process behind understanding each type of question, because then you're actually preparing for something that you've never seen, you know, and not just like, oh, this paper, oh, I did so well on this specific paper. That's not the one that's going to come. So that's not going to have any impact. So always ask yourself why. Each time you write a paper, take time to like sit down, break down everything, and that will definitely guarantee an improvement in your score. So don't forget that it's not going to make a difference if you just like, you know, skim through and if you just write a paper and forget about it. Okay, so this is, I'll skip over writing just because, you know, it's not your writing paper. But remember that anything that focuses on vocabulary, punctuation, word choice, yeah, is going to be a writing question. And like I said, you can tell by reading the question and even just by looking at the options. They're asking you to pick between 4 words. This is not a reading question. So we saw the first like 6 questions were asking for the most logical, those are writing questions. And so it's question 7, precise word choice or phrase. So we're going to go to number 8. It's asking the following text is from Charlotte Bronte's 1847. Sorry, I made a mistake already. We said the first thing we're going to do is read the question. So the first thing that you should do is read the question. That tells you what kind of question you're dealing with. And it tells you what you should do, like what you should focus on as you actually go through the question. So it asks, which choice best states the main purpose of the text? So obviously we know it's a main purpose or big idea question. The other thing is you're given such a short passage that everything is going to be relevant. So don't skip over this, even though it's like just the title. This is going to help you understand the passage. So that's the other thing that you should do. Always read through everything, whether it's a title or whatever, because it's so short. You know, they're not going to give you anything that's irrelevant. And I know some people advocate for read the options first. I don't, because I feel like it makes you biased when you're reading the passage and you end up justifying an answer that's not even an answer. So for every section, even math or writing, whatever, my recommendation is always find your answer first, because then it's a matter of finding that answer that you already know is the answer. And the College Board is not going to put like answer options that are very far from being correct, you know. If you look at the answers, you find that some of them have like an element of truth to them, but maybe it's just not answering the question or things like that. So don't trap yourself by biasing yourself, you know, just go through the passage, find an answer, which is why it's important for you to know what the main purpose is, because you can easily find what your answer is. Then after that, you can go through the options, because then you know what you're looking for as you go through the options. Okay, so I'm going to read through it. It says the following text is from Charlotte Bronte's 1847 novel, Jane Eyre. Jane works as a governess at Thornfield Hall. So this gives us the context of who Jane is and what she's doing. She's working as a governess. It says, I went on with my day's business tranquilly, but ever and anon vague suggestions kept wandering across my brain of reasons why I should quit Thornfield. And I kept involuntarily framing advertisements and pondering conjectures about new situations. These thoughts I did not think to check. They might germinate and bear fruit if they could. Okay, so this passage is kind of different because it's a literature passage. If this was like science, there's a specific procedure that we would follow, but this is literature. So the best thing you can do is ask yourself, okay, what have I gotten from this passage, right? So it's seeming like it's talking about like how Jane was feeling on that day, like throughout, her business was going tranquilly, suggestions kept wandering. So what was going on inside? She had reasons, okay, framing advertisements, this is her imagination. So everything throughout is talking about how she was feeling on the inside, right? That's kind of like the big picture of everything. And if you don't do that, it's very easy to not even find what the main idea is. Okay, so we know what the big picture is, how Jane was feeling on that day. It seems like she wants to leave, there were suggestions about her quitting her governess job and whatnot. Okay, so we're going to go through the options. The other thing that will help you is if you look at the format of the options, you have keywords, convey, emphasize, demonstrate, describe. That alone is enough to help you kind of narrow down your options. Because in this passage, she was talking about different things. It wasn't just like one thing being emphasized. So probably B isn't our answer. That can also kind of guide you. But the main point is if an answer is correct, everything about it should be correct. You shouldn't have to like make concessions and be like, oh, this one isn't so close, but anyway, it's the best. If an answer is correct, it's going to be correct. So that should guide you as well as you go through your answer options. So I'm going to go through. A says to convey a contrast between Jane's outward calmness and internal restlessness. B says to emphasize Jane's loyalty to the people she works for at Thornfield Hall. C, to demonstrate that Jane finds her situation both challenging and deeply fulfilling. D, to describe Jane's determination to secure employment outside Thornfield Hall. So before I comment, does anyone have an answer? Like, what are you leaning towards? And you can type it in the chat if you want. You can speak out loud. What are you thinking? A, B, C, or D? Okay, we have an A, to convey a contrast between Jane's outward calmness and internal restlessness. Do the rest of us agree with A? Or are there any other answers? Okay, great. So you don't have to, but Onike, do you want to explain why you think A is the answer? If you can say no if you want to. Okay, so I'll go ahead. I definitely agree with A. So the first thing is we read through the passage and we knew it said her business was going peacefully, but her mind wasn't there. Like she kept on seeing reasons that she should leave. So it's definitely conveying a contrast. And that's the entire passage. Everything was talking about how she was feeling on the inside. And that should be the first box that you check when you're looking at the main purpose. Am I only getting it from one part of the passage or not? And then we're going to go through the other options because I want you guys to see, because maybe you thought another option is the answer. So we're going to go through the options, and seeing why they're wrong is also very helpful, right? Because we've seen, okay, why did we pick A? We picked it because it's talking about the entire passage. So obviously it's talking about the main purpose. And that's the other thing. There's only going to be one answer that actually fulfills what you're being asked to do. You will never have to pick between two answers that are both correct. So if you think another one is correct, it's either you're not thinking about it in the right way, or I don't know, maybe you just didn't understand the passage. So question B says to emphasize Jane's loyalty to the people she works for at Thornfield Hall. Honestly, I can see what would make someone pick this answer, because this is talking about how her business was going tranquilly. Okay, suggestions kept wandering, okay, of why she should quit, but she was still there, right? Okay, she kept framing advertisements. Oh yeah, she was thinking about new situations, and yes, she was still there. So if you went for B, probably you went beyond what's given to you. Remember what we said? when you're reading this passage, when you're reading any passage, you won't have to like reason, oh yeah, because she did this, maybe this, oh, maybe this and that. That's a lot of assumptions. So assumptions are probably going to lead you to the wrong answer, right? It does say, yeah, she thought of leaving, but she didn't, right? Like, but that's not what the passage is trying to do, because that's something that you thought about, I don't know if that's making sense, but that comes from outside reasoning that's not given to us in the passage directly. So B is wrong. C says to demonstrate that Jane finds a situation both challenging and deeply fulfilling. So I can see why, the challenging part, she was really thinking about leaving, but there's no part that says that it was deeply fulfilling. And maybe you might say, oh, maybe that's why she stayed. Oh yeah, maybe, but maybe is not going to give you an answer. You're relying on the facts given to you in the passage. And D says to describe Jane's determination to secure employment outside Thornfield Hall. It doesn't even say that she wanted to find employment. It actually says she was like, she didn't want to think about leaving. These are involuntary. Those ideas were involuntary, right? So this, just from this question alone, we can see what the main purpose is, how to get it, how not to get it. So the first thing I would say is concentrate on the whole passage. Do not get an answer from just like one idea that maybe popped up in your mind. It should be from the entire passage. And then if an answer is correct, everything about it should be correct. So do we have any questions on this question? Any contributions, ideas? Okay, we'll skip to question 9. So you can see we still have paired passages while you have two passages. Okay. The first thing we're going to do is go straight to the question. It says, based on the texts, what would the author of text 2 most likely say about text 1's characterization of the discovery involving EGR? So this specific question is inference just because it's asking like, what would this person say? Kind of like what's implied, or what would you infer from what's given to you in the passage? And remember, we're relying on the passage. And we're going to get our answer first of all. So what are we focusing on? Remember, before you read the passage, you have to know exactly what you're looking for. So we're looking at what the author of text 2 would say about text 1 characterization of the discovery. Just because of how this question is phrased, I would rather start with text 2 and then go to text 1, because you're kind of like, you're trying to read text 1 from the context of the author of text 2. Like what would they say about what's being said? So start with text 2. It says, when Mansi Srivastava and her team reported that the panther worms, like humans, possess a gene for EGR, it caused excitement. However, as the team pointed out, the gene likely functions very differently in humans than it does in panther worms. Srivastava has likened EGR to a switch that activates other genes involved in regeneration in panther worms, but how this switch operates in humans is unclear. Okay, this is a lot of information. So the first thing that you should do is think of what you're looking for. We're looking for EGR, about the characterization involving EGR. So first of all, you need to know, what does this author think about EGR, right? So it says, yes, they're panther worms, they possess that gene. Okay, the gene functions differently, and he's likened it to a switch in genes. Okay, so everything altogether says both humans and worms have that EGR, whatever it is, but it functions differently in humans and in the worms. So that's the major big picture. This EGR functions differently. Okay. So now we're going to read text 1, and we're going to see what discovery has been made and how it relates to what that author thinks. So it says most animals can regenerate some parts of their bodies, such as skin, but when a 3-banded panther worm is cut into pieces, each piece grows into a new worm. That's interesting. Okay, researchers are investigating this feat partly to learn more about humans' comparatively limited abilities to regenerate, and they're making exciting progress. An especially promising discovery is that both humans and panther worms have a gene for early growth response, EGR, linked to regeneration. Okay, so what is all of this saying? It's saying, it's talking about regeneration. Yeah, from the first line, regeneration. And that's, I'll go back to reading. But this is the difference between literature and science passages. For science passages, the main idea is going to be in the first sentence or the second sentence. But very close to the beginning, the author has to state what they're talking about. So if you are trying to figure out what the main idea is, you would most likely focus on the first two sentences, and that will give you what it is. For example, in text 2, we found that the main idea was that both of them possess EGR. That was in the first sentence. Okay, so that should help you for science passages or social studies passages. Okay, so it's saying, okay, both of them, most animals can regenerate. Okay, but there's a difference between this worm. Okay, it grows into any worm. And then researchers are trying to figure out what this is, regeneration. I think the key is in the last sentence. It says, an especially promising discovery, because that's what we're focusing on, right? About the discovery involving EGR. So an especially promising discovery is that both humans and panther worms have a gene for early growth response. So that's what EGR is. So both humans and panther worms have a gene for EGR linked to regeneration. So they both have that EGR linked to regeneration. Okay. So now let's see what A is. It is reasonable given that Srivastava and her team would have identified how EGR functions in both humans and panther worms. B, it is overly optimistic given additional observations from Srivastava and her team. C, it is unexpected given that Srivastava and her team's findings were generally met with enthusiasm. D, it is unfairly dismissive given the progress that Srivastava and her team have reported. So what do you guys think? A, B, C, or D? Okay, so if you get stuck, remember that elimination is your friend. If you're able to find out why something isn't the answer, that narrows down your options and it might help you get to the answer. So sometimes you're not able to identify, right, instantly that this is correct, but maybe you can tell that this is wrong. So start from there. If you're stuck, just try to eliminate what is definitely not the answer. So we know that, let's see, both of them, text 2, the author said both of them possess that gene, okay, functions differently, and Srivastava has likened EGR to a switch that activates other genes involved in regeneration in panther worms, but how it operates in humans is unclear. Okay, so we have B, okay. So we're going to go through all of them and kind of see if we can eliminate any. A says it is reasonable. So saying the discovery about EGR. Okay, okay, I see what it is. So the first author is saying that this link definitely, this EGR definitely has regeneration purposes in both panther worms and humans. But the discovery made here is that it activates other genes involved. So we don't know whether it can actually generate, if it can actually cause regeneration in humans. Okay, so A says it's reasonable given that this team has identified how EGR functions in both. This is wrong because it's just wrong. Like it says they've identified how it functions in both, but it clearly said it's unclear how it operates in humans. So A is wrong because it's wrong factually. It has wrong information. B says it's overly optimistic. So yeah, I definitely agree with B just because of what we read again, where it said they're not really sure whether it can activate regeneration in humans, but this one says, yeah, it does help. So let's skip B. Let's go to C. It says it is unexpected given that Srivastava and her team's findings were generally met with enthusiasm. I wouldn't say unexpected. I think this is just like taking everything out of context. We don't even know how the findings were made. Like who was enthusiastic? We don't know anything about that. Okay. This says it is unfairly dismissive given the progress that Srivastava and her team have reported. So D would be true if it was the other way around. Like if this team was judging this team's progress, then they would have said, oh no, you're dismissing what's been given. But in this case, they're saying we don't have enough information. And then this one is saying we have the information. So that would be very, very optimistic. So yeah, B is our answer. Okay, so thank you. Do we have anyone who disagrees or, anything that you want to add? Okay. So this has shown us something very different, how to deal with inference questions, how to deal with two passages, how to figure out how to get someone's point of view just from a few sentences. So that's something that you need to practice a lot. And the more that you do it, the better you become. And remember, if you get stuck, elimination is your friend. That will really help you. Okay, question 10 says, the following text is adapted, what is the main idea? So we're focusing on the main idea. Again, we're going to read the top. It says, the following text is adapted from William Shakespeare's 1609 poem, Sonnet 27. The poem is addressed to a close friend as if he were physically present. So that's the context. This poem is assuming that this friend is physically present. Weary with toil, I hurry to my bed, the dear repose for limbs with travel tired, but then begins a journey in my head to work my mind when my body's works expired. For then my thoughts from far where, I think I should read this again because weary with toil, I hurry to my bed, the dear repose for limbs with travel tired, but then begins a journey in my head to work my mind when body's works expired. For then my thoughts, from far where I abide, begin a zealous pilgrimage to thee, and keep my drooping eyelids opened wide. So addressing this to someone as if they were physically present. This is also a lot of information, but just try to see like, okay, what have I gotten from this passage? So this person is tired and they want to sleep, kind of, yeah. It's kind of saying, okay, I hurry to my bed, I am tired. Then a journey begins in my head, kind of like a dream, to work my mind. His body is expired, so his body is tired and he wants to sleep. That's basically what everything is saying. Okay, so A says the speaker is asleep and dreaming about traveling to see the friend. B says the speaker is planning an upcoming trip to the friend's house. C says the speaker is too fatigued to continue a discussion with the friend. D says the speaker is thinking about the friend instead of immediately falling asleep. So what do you guys think? A, B, C, or D? C, okay. Speaker is too fatigued to continue a discussion with the friend. Does everyone agree with C, or do we have any different opinions? D, okay, the speaker is thinking about the friend instead of immediately falling asleep. Okay. Anyone disagree, agree? Does anyone want to say why they're for those answers? Okay, so we're going to use elimination again, just because we have two suggested answers. And we're trying to see we're trying to eliminate and see what's wrong with each of them, because that should lead us to the right one. Okay, so remember the context. This is a poem addressed to a close friend as if he were physically present. So imagining that these two are together, they're both physically present. And that already eliminates A, because it says the speaker is asleep and is dreaming about traveling to see the friend. But we already know that, it's assuming that he's physically present. So he wouldn't be talking about traveling to see the friend. A is out. B says planning an upcoming trip to the friend's house. There's nothing about a trip anyway in the poem. And also we know he's there. So B doesn't make any sense. So I left with C and D. Okay. So C says the speaker is too fatigued to continue a discussion with the friend. So let's see. I think the key here is discussion, because remember we said if an answer is correct, everything about it should be correct. So we know he's definitely fatigued because it keeps saying he's tired, his body's works expired, and different things like that. And keeping my drooping eyelids open wide. Okay, so he's weary, he's toil, he hurries to his bed, the dear repose for his limbs. So he's trying to rest his limbs and he's tired. He begins a journey in his head, okay, to work his mind when his body expired. So the journey, I see. So the journey is in his head and he's trying to work his mind. His thoughts, far from where I abide, begin a zealous pilgrimage to thee. Okay, so I can see how the discussion comes in, right? It's like, it doesn't say he's sleeping. It says he's resting his limbs on his bed. The journey is in his head, but then his eyelids are open. So he's not asleep. He's like The journey is going on in his head, his thoughts. Begin a zealous pilgrimage to thee. Okay. So I think the trick here is it doesn't say anything about him talking. It says the journey started in his head. He's trying to work his mind. His thoughts are far, so he's like, begin a zealous pilgrimage to thee and keep his eyelids open wide. So I'm leaning more towards D because it's kind of like you see everything about thoughts. So it's kind of like he's thinking about this friend and he's trying to keep his eyelids open wide. So he's still awake. His friend is physically present. We know that. And we know that he's beginning a pilgrimage to thee. So kind of like he's thinking about this friend instead of falling asleep because his eyelids are open. So I'm for D. Anyone disagree with D or has anything? Okay, so this shows this like C is really close. The only thing is the discussion. So you can see that just one word is enough to disqualify an answer. Just the fact that it says there's a discussion going on. So if we're using an elimination method, it would be very hard to eliminate D because, we talked about how, the thoughts are definitely there and he's definitely not falling asleep yet. So it would be very hard to eliminate D, and I think you would be forced to pick D because I think it's the better answer either way. So even if you didn't eliminate C, but you end up like going through D, it would be, I feel like that's still a good approach and it would probably still lead you to the right answer. Yeah, so do we have any questions? Okay, so this session is normally 2 hours, but I have a commitment, so it will just be an hour for today. So I guess I'll just go over the different things that we learned from the different kinds of questions, and then we'll end there. So we started from question 8. Where is question 8? Yeah, we started from question 8. I think the main thing that we learned from this question is like how to get the big picture from a literature passage. Remember, it's a story and you're trying to see like, what have I learned from this story? And if you're not able to get that, it's very easy to pick the wrong answer. So keep that in mind. We also said that verbs can help you convey, emphasize, demonstrate, describe. That can kind of lead you towards the right answer. So that's something to keep in mind. And we said if an answer is even slightly wrong, then it's wrong. Then for question 9, I think we learned a lot from this one, how to deal with paired passages, the approach that you can take, and like how to come up with someone's point of view from just sentences in the passage. And that was able to guide us to the right answer. We also talked about how even if the right answer doesn't like jump out at you, you can use elimination method and that should guide you to the right one. Question 10, we talked about the importance of the context because that helped us eliminate 2 options, remember? So it's important to get the context by reading this small excerpt at the top of the passage. And then we looked at how like every answer should be 100% correct. Like there shouldn't be anything to make you doubt that that answer is right because that's probably why the answer is wrong. So never like make concessions in your mind and be like, oh yeah, well, even though it's like slightly wrong, it's also, the best thing you can do is if you're not 100% sure, try to eliminate the others. And that should help you. And it's not even a long process, you're just thinking in your head, you've read a short passage, you know the facts in your mind. So elimination is not even going to take you a long time. Yeah. And if you're not sure, I don't know, in terms of how fast you are individually, but if you're not sure about an answer, but you feel like you don't have time to go through the elimination method, my advice is pick one that you think is the answer, but put a star or something, mark it so that you know that if you have extra time, you come back to it. And that should help you more. Another approach that I've heard of people doing is finishing all the writing questions first and then doing the reading. Because generally, writing doesn't take as long as reading. But I am for like going from the first question to the last question. So overall, there's a lot of approaches that you can take. I feel like the good example was this paired passage. We would have started with 1 and then gone to 2. That would have still been okay, but I just prefer to start with 2 and then go to 1. So the more that you practice, it will be easy to tell what works for you, what doesn't work. But no one can do that for you. That's what you are supposed to do on your own. And remember that break down why you got an answer wrong and understand the thought process behind it. because that will help you when you go through another paper. Yeah, so are there any questions, contributions, or anything, even just like a general question on the SAT?
Yes, I would like to ask a question, ma'am.
Sorry?
I would like to ask a question.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, it's not really related to the SAT.
Yeah, you can still go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I find most reading and most paper and test materials available online, like Erica Melzer and the rest. But so far, I haven't seen any material for the digital SAT. I don't know if you have any, if you could share with us.
Did you say ACT or SAT?
SAT.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So you wanted like material specifically for the digital SAT?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I personally haven't seen any material that's like only for the digital. As far as I know, like I haven't taken it obviously, but as far as I know, the same material should be like still relevant. I can write it down. Let me write it down in my to-do list. I can try to check and see if I can find anything like specifically for the digital SAT. But the same books that you use for the normal SAT should be the same ones. I would just say for practice, just like stick to the online. I don't know. I think the College Board has an option where you can practice like a digital SAT exam, but I will look into it. Are you in the WhatsApp group?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So I'll definitely look into it and see if I can find any specific material. And if I do, I'll share it. But as far as I know, the same material that you use should still be helpful.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, and I found out that there are some people who have taken it in the group. So I think I might ask, like, there should be a day when they share their experience, because that would be very helpful. So I'll write that down as well. Just like ask for people who've taken it so that they can help you guys out and like, tell you how their experience was and all those things.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. All right, so let me stop recording. Thanks guys for coming. In case you want to go over